Out on a scorched Montana valley, Caleb Merrick is fighting a losing battle. 3 years of drought, collapsing fences, starving cattle, and a bank circling like a vulture. His father died for this land, and now it feels less like a legacy and more like a prison. Then, without warning, a dusty stagecoach stops at the fork in the road, and a woman steps down with summer blue eyes and a past Caleb never survived. She vanished 8 years ago. She swore she wrote. He swears he never got a single letter. And just as old feelings rise from the ashes, disaster hits. The only dam keeping their cattle alive starts to break. What happens when the person you loved returns? Right when everything you've built is about to collapse. Lesson. This story proves that hope doesn't arrive when life is easy. It arrives when you finally stop fighting alone. If you're ready for a love story forged by hardship, loyalty, and second chances, stay with me till the end. And don't forget to like, comment your favorite moment, share this with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories like this. The Montana sun beat down on the Merrick Ranch, baking the dirt hard as rock. At 32, Caleb felt 100 years old, watching over the 200 acres his daddy had died for. The cattle were thin, the fences were sagging, and the old ranch house groaned just like he did. This land was his legacy, and it was his cage. "Boss, we're down to just 3 good horses," his foreman Miguel said from the corral. Miguel's eyes asked a question Caleb wouldn't answer. "How much longer can we do this?" "Then we make do with 3, Caleb answered, his voice flat. He wouldn't give up. Not ever. The drought had been choking them for 3 years, turning creeks into dust and hope, into a bitter memory. As he headed for the house, Caleb heard the rumble of wheels. He squinted toward the road and saw a stagecoach, which was a mighty strange sight these days. Most everyone took the train now. He watched, curious, as the dusty coach rolled down the valley road. It pulled to a stop right at the fork between his land and the neighboring Hart place. Caleb's jaw set hard. If it was another banker here to talk about his debt, they were in for a short visit. He started walking toward them, ready for a fight. The old driver, Ben Tucker, climbed down. "Afternoon, Caleb." Ben was grinning like he knew a secret. "Got a special passenger for you." Before Caleb could ask, the coach door opened. A soft leather glove appeared, then a fine-looking boot. And then she stepped out into the sun. The world just stopped. It was Evelyn. He hadn't seen her in 8 years, not since she was 17. She was a woman now, with hair like spun honey and a confidence she'd learned back east. But it was her eyes that buckled his knees. They were the same summer blue he remembered. "Caleb," she said. And after 8 years of silence, his name on her lips nearly broke him. "Evelyn," he managed to say, his voice rough. Evelyn Hart, his best friend. The girl who rode horses with him, shared secrets with him, and then vanished. The girl who promised to write but never sent a single letter. "I'm home," she said, with a smile that felt like the first drop of rain after a long drought. His mind reeled. 8 years he had spent building walls around his heart, and she was tearing them down with a single look. "Your uncle's place," he finally said, pointing toward the Hart Ranch. "Yes," she said, her eyes staying on his. "He wrote that he needed some help. The ranch has been having a hard time." Caleb nearly scoffed. Every ranch was having a hard time, especially the Hart place. Her uncle was too old and too proud to manage it alone. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words. Then Ben Tucker cleared his throat. "Well, these trunks won't move themselves, Caleb. Your neighbor could use a hand." It wasn't a request. Ben knew their whole history. There was no saying no. He and Miguel loaded her trunks onto the wagon. It was plain to see this wasn't just a visit. She was home to stay. The thought was both terrifying and thrilling. The 1.5-mile ride to her uncle's house felt like 1,000. Evelyn sat beside him, so close he could feel the warmth from her. Yet they were worlds apart. "The valley looks different," she said softly. "Smaller." Or maybe you just got bigger, Caleb said, keeping his eyes fixed on the road. It was safer that way. The drought, she said. It's really bad, isn't it? 3 years, he confirmed. It's been 3 long years. My apologies, she said, her voice full of a sympathy that caught him off guard. It is just weather, he replied gruffly. I am sorry about your daddy, too. I should have come home for the funeral. Caleb's knuckles went white on the reins. His father had worked himself into an early grave 2 years back trying to save this place. You had your own life in Boston, he said, his voice flat. Her quiet question, did I, hung in the air. Before he could make sense of it, the Hart homestead appeared. It looked rough. The porch sagged, windows were boarded up, and the barn roof had a hole clear to the sky. A weathered but smiling Thomas Hart shuffled out. Girl, his voice boomed, you made it. Evelyn leaped from the wagon to hug her uncle, leaving Caleb to wrestle with her trunks and the ache in his chest. As Caleb hauled the first trunk, Thomas called out, You are the spitting image of your father, son. He would be proud. Just trying to keep it all from blowing away, sir. None of that, sir, business, boy. You used to call me Uncle Thomas. Evelyn's worried voice cut in. Uncle, the house is in pieces. Well, sure, her uncle said with a grin. That is why I sent for you, to help an old man out. Her eyes met Caleb's, and he saw it clear as day. She had no idea. Thomas had not told her how bad things truly were. Welcome home, Evelyn. Welcome back to a life where the only thing you can count on is hard work. They finished unloading in a heavy silence, a silence that Caleb knew he and Miguel, the foreman, would be discussing later. With the sun dipping low, Caleb tried to leave. Caleb, wait, Evelyn called from the porch. In the golden light, she looked just like she had years ago, before Boston. Thank you, she said, for everything. And for not being angry, I came back. Was he angry? No, what he felt was a whole lot more complicated than that. It was the dangerous stirring of feelings he had buried deep. Your uncle needs a hand, was all he could manage to say. Is that the only reason you stayed? She asked gently. He gripped the reins, wanting to tell her he stayed, because the land was his prison. He looked up, and the defiance in her eyes told him she already knew. You always could see right through my nonsense, he said softly. I remember a boy who was not afraid of anything, she said, moving closer. A boy who dreamed big. That boy grew into a man who forgot how to dream at all. The truth of her words hit him hard. He wanted to argue, but she was right. Dreams do not pay the bills, Evelyn, he said, the bitterness in his own voice surprising him. No, she agreed, her voice soft, but they give you a reason to pay them. She turned and walked back inside, leaving him alone with the sunset. On the ride home, he could not shake her words. Evelyn Hart was back. She looked at him and saw the boy he used to be, the boy who had loved her more than the land itself. The ranch was dark and silent when he got back. Inside, the emptiness was a physical presence. His father's chair sat empty by the cold hearth, a constant reminder of all he had lost. This was his life now, hard work, shadows, and silence. He poured a cheap whiskey and stared out into the dark valley. Across the way, a single lamp burned in the Hart house. She was there. An old confession surfaced in his mind, words he would never speak aloud. I have loved you since we were kids. But love was a dream for a different kind of man and a different kind of life. For him, love was just another thing he could not afford to lose. Well, shoot. There she was, stepping down from that coach. Caleb tipped back the whiskey and let it burn. Tomorrow was another day of work. He would keep his head down, his heart locked away, and he would survive this mess. He had survived everything else, after all. Evelyn Hart could come home all she wanted, with her summer blue eyes talking about the boy he used to be. It was not going to change a thing. The next morning dawned clear and hot. As he was loading fence posts onto the wagon, he saw her. Evelyn, riding down the valley road on her uncle's old mare, Bess. She sat that horse like she was born to it, a ghost from every dream that haunted him. and she was heading straight for his ranch. Caleb kept working, pretending his heart was not hammering against his ribs. "Morning," she called. "Morning." He did not look up from the wire. "Uncle Thomas said you might need an extra pair of hands today." Now he looked up. "Work?" "That is why I am here," she said, a hint of a smile in her voice. "To help with the ranch. I have Miguel. Miguel is helping my uncle. Besides, fence mending goes faster with two people." She was right, damn her. But working side by side with Evelyn was the last thing on God's green earth he wanted. "Suit yourself," he heard himself say. Evelyn dismounted with an easy grace, tied Bess to the rail, and pulled on a pair of worn leather gloves. "All right, boss, where do we start?" They fell into the old rhythm of the work without saying much. Caleb dug the holes and Evelyn cleared the old wire. The sun climbed higher and sweat soaked clean through their shirts. Finally, they started to talk. "Boston must seem mighty tame after all this," Caleb said, grunting as he pulled an old post from the ground. "In some ways," she said, handing him the water canteen. "Different rules, I suppose." He looked at her. "So, did you do what your aunt wanted? Marry well?" Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "I came back alone, Caleb. That should answer your question." A feeling dangerously close to hope flared in his chest, and he stomped it down hard. They kept moving down the fence line under the blazing sun. "Why did you really come back?" The question just slipped out. "I woke up one morning in Boston," she started, "and realized I could not remember the last time I felt anything real." "Real?" "Yes, real," she repeated. "Boston was like living in a pretty painting, all proper and perfect and completely empty. I missed this." She turned to face him, her eyes burning with intensity. "The heat is real. The work is real. The struggle is real. I missed home." She did not say his name, but he heard it hanging there in the hot, still air. "Real is not always better," he said, his voice rough. "Real is watching your father work himself into an early grave," he bit out. "Real is standing over that grave knowing you might lose everything he fought for. You think you know what you came back to? You will last one hard winter and run right back to Boston." "That is not fair," her eyes flashed. "Nothing about this is fair." The words exploded out of him. "You left. You promised you would write. And you never did. Not once." He stopped, horrified by how much he had just revealed. "What did you just say?" she whispered, stepping closer. "I wrote to you." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Every week for the first year. Every month after that. I wrote until I figured you had forgotten me." Caleb spun around. "What letters?" "Dozens of them. I sent them right here to the ranch. I told you everything. I poured my heart out in those letters." Tears shined in her eyes. "And you never answered." Letters she had written. His mind raced back to those years. His father had been so angry when she left, always going on about how love makes a man weak. Could he have taken them? His father was 2 years gone, and the truth was buried with him. "I never got them," Caleb said, his voice hoarse. "Evelyn, I swear to God, I never got a single one." The hope that bloomed in her face was almost painful to see. "Then you did not just forget about me?" "Forget you?" A bitter laugh escaped him. "I tried, Lord knows I tried." She stepped closer, her eyes demanding the truth. "Do not forget what, Caleb?" He wanted to tell her everything, about how she was the one who made him feel alive, the love that wrecked him for anyone else. But he could not get the words out. Just as she raised a hand, a shout shattered the moment. It was Miguel, riding his horse hard. "Boss!" he yelled out of breath. "The North Fork! The dam is breaking! We have an hour, maybe less." A cold dread washed over Caleb. That dam held back the only water keeping his cattle alive. All their water was about to wash away, taking what little they had left. Caleb barked at Miguel to get every tool they owned. Just then, Evelyn started toward her horse. "I am coming with you." He tried to stop her. "No, this is not—" She cut him off hard. "Don't you dare tell me this is not my problem, Caleb. When your ranch fails, those big outfits from back east will swallow my uncle's land next. We are all connected out here. You taught me that when we were 12. He knew she was right. "Fine, but you do exactly as I say. If that dam breaks while we are on it, we all go down with it." The dam was tilted and groaning, worse than he imagined. Water was eating away at its base, and it was only a matter of hours. "Miguel, start cutting timber for a brace," Caleb ordered. "Evelyn, we need the biggest rocks you can find from the creek." They fought against time and the weight of the water. Evelyn hauled stones that should have been too heavy for her. Miguel worked the timber with an expert speed. They packed and braced, building a prayer out of rock and wood. After 2 hours, the structure was stable. "It will hold for now," Miguel said, wiping his brow. "Partners," Evelyn said simply, looking at Caleb. "That is what neighbors are for." They rode back as the sun began to set, tired, but feeling a small sense of victory. At the property line, Evelyn stopped her horse. "Same time tomorrow? I can help with the fence work in the mornings." Caleb knew he should say no, that being near her was dangerous for the walls he had built around his heart. But he remembered that burdens are lighter when they are shared. "Same time," he agreed. Watching her ride off, he felt something he had thought was long dead stir inside him. It was a dangerous and terrifying thing called hope, and for the first time in years, he did not try to crush it. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Each morning, Evelyn met him at the fence line, and they worked until the sun was high. They were not just mending fences, but rebuilding a friendship that had been broken. "You have changed," Evelyn said one morning. "You are quieter." Caleb drove the post hole digger into the hard ground. 8 years is a long time. "It is more than that," she insisted. "Something happened to you." He finally let one of his walls crumble. "My father poured his entire life into this ranch. When my mother left, it broke him. He taught me that caring about anything more than the work would destroy a man." "And you believed him?" she asked softly. "I watched it happen every single day," Caleb said, his voice flat. "This land takes everything. You cannot afford to want anything but survival." Evelyn looked at him with her clear blue eyes. "That is not living, Caleb. That is just existing. What good is the land if you are too empty inside to feel why it matters?" Her words struck him like a physical blow, because she was right. The ranch had become his prison. Seeing she had pushed enough, she pulled a thermos from her saddlebag. "Coffee?" They sat in the shade, and he found himself asking about her life in Boston, wanting to know the woman she had become. "Boston was proper," she said, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "My aunt tried her best to marry me off to lawyers and bankers. I spent my time reading books on modern ranching, thinking I could bring something useful back here." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "There was one man, Charles Whitmore. He was kind. He asked me to be his wife." Caleb's knuckles turned white as he gripped his tin cup. "What did you tell him?" His voice was dangerously low. "I said I needed time. But I realized I was just measuring him against a boy I used to know." Her voice softened. "A boy who was not afraid of anything. I still see glimpses of him in you, Caleb. You have just buried him under years of hardship." Before he could find a response to the truth in her words, Miguel's shout echoed from the ridge. "Boss, the cattle broke through the south fence!" Caleb was on his feet in an instant. 20 head were pouring onto her family's land. "I will circle around them," Evelyn yelled, already steering her horse west. "Stay away from that creek bank," he hollered after her. But she was already gone, a confident blur against the plains. He watched her handle the herd with a skill that took his breath away. She was far more than just a good rider now. They had the cattle nearly turned when it all went sideways. The lead steer spooked, and the whole herd bolted in a blind panic straight for the creek. Evelyn pushed her horse, Bess, to head them off, getting too close to the unstable edge. The earth simply gave way. He watched in horror as horse and rider tumbled down the crumbling bank. Caleb was already galloping toward the ravine, his heart hammering against his ribs. He found her next to the trapped, terrified mare, with blood on her temple but her voice perfectly calm. "Easy now, girl." "I have to get to her head," Evelyn said, trying to push herself up. "You are hurt," Caleb bit out. "It is just a scratch. I am not leaving my horse." He saw the stubborn fire in her eyes and knew it was useless to argue. "Fine, but you listen to me." With Miguel arriving with rope, they worked for a solid hour. Evelyn's soothing voice calmed the horse while the men dug and heaved. At last, Bess stood on solid ground, shaking but safe. "You are a damn fool," Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion as he helped Evelyn to her feet. "Miguel, take her to the house and go fetch Doc Morrison." "I do not need a doctor." "You are bleeding, and you can barely breathe. Please, Evelyn." The word felt foreign, stripped of his usual armor. "Just let me make sure you are okay." Something in his voice made her finally nod. After Miguel led her away, Caleb stood by the ravine, his hands shaking. He had almost lost her, and the thought was a cold terror in his gut. This was why he built his walls so high. Caring for someone meant this kind of agony. But all he could see was her face, strong and unafraid, and his walls were turning to dust. When he got back to the ranch, Doc Morrison's buggy was already in the yard. Doc Morrison met him as he dismounted. "She will live," he said plainly. "A concussion and 2 cracked ribs. That girl is tougher than boot leather, but she needs real rest. You know she will not sit still over at her place." The doctor was right. She would be trying to mend fences by sunrise. "She can stay here," Caleb said, the words surprising even himself. "We can keep an eye on her." The old doctor's eyes twinkled with a knowing light. "We, you say? You know, your father always said that girl would break your heart." Caleb's jaw tightened. He said caring about anything was the fastest road to ruin. The doctor finished packing his bag. "Your father was wrong about a lot of things, son." He found Evelyn resting on the old sofa, looking pale but stubborn. Rosa, Miguel's wife, had already cleaned her up and wrapped her ribs. She looked smaller than he had ever seen her. "Before you say a word, I am fine," she said. Caleb felt a smile touch his lips. "I remember you said that when you broke your arm. We were 14. Her own smile was faint. "And you carried me 2 miles home. You sat outside my door for 3 days because you thought I was dying." "Was that different?" she asked quietly. "Or are you just better at hiding your feelings now?" He turned to the window. "You cannot stay at your uncle's place. You will stay here. The guest room is ready and Rosa can check on you." "So are you asking me to move in with you, Caleb Merrick?" Heat rose up his neck. "I'm offering you a safe place to heal. That is all." But her eyes had a knowing glint that saw right through him. "Okay," she said. "I accept." He remembered her at 16, sick with influenza but trying to check on a mare. He had to physically carry her back to bed. "You were always carrying me somewhere." Evelyn's voice went soft and wistful. The memory hung heavy in the air. He had to get away. "I will get the guest room ready." At the door, she stopped him. "Thank you, Caleb, for being you." He gave a short nod and escaped. The guest room was a time capsule, sealed off since his mother left and his father locked the door on his own grief. Caleb threw open the windows, airing out the ghosts and putting fresh sheets on the bed. Having Evelyn Hart under his roof, just a few doors down, was the worst and the only idea he had. He never heard Rosa come in. "You love her," the old woman said, plain as day. She had been with the ranch for 15 years and saw everything. "I am just helping out a neighbor." Rosa was not moved. "You love her. You always have. Your father saw that snake and tried to kill it, thinking he was keeping you safe. All he really did was teach you to be scared." "I'm not scared." "No? Then why are you in here making beds instead of out there telling that girl the truth?" because the truth won't change a thing. I'm one bad season from this whole ranch going under. What kind of life is that to offer someone? Better than one where you lose the ranch and the girl because you were too afraid to fight. Your father let grief make him a bitter man. Don't you dare make his same mistake. I ain't seen you this alive in 8 years, and this old house is finally feeling like a home again. You think she came back just to help her uncle? That girl's running from something in Boston, same as you're hiding from something here. Maybe you two could stop running and hiding together. She made it about 15 feet before her ribs made her gasp. Caleb caught her, lifting her as easy as he did when they were kids. I hate this, Evelyn mumbled into his shirt. Hate what? Needin' help? Everybody needs a hand sometimes. I'm just used to doing for myself. He set her down gently on the bed in the guest room. Well, welcome to the Merrick Ranch. Around here we help our own. She laughed, then winced. You're going to be a real pain about this, aren't you? Absolutely. Doctor's orders say rest, and I take 'em seriously. Since when? Since you're the one who needs to listen. The words were more honest than he'd meant. Caleb, rest, he said, backing out of the room. He worked himself to the bone that afternoon, hoping to be tired enough to sleep, but when night fell, he found himself outside her door just listening. Then he heard it, faint, halting piano music. Caleb walked down the hall and saw Evelyn at his mother's dusty piano, her fingers carefully picking out a melody. I didn't know you played, he said from the doorway. Her hand stopped. My aunt made me take lessons, said every lady needed a skill. She touched a key. But it was the only time I could be honest. I could play everything I couldn't say. Oh, what are you playing now? Something I wrote in Boston when the city felt like it was closing in. I'd pretend I was back here where the sky was big enough to hold it all. Play something happy, he said, moving closer. Her fingers found a bright dancing tune from the old summer dances. Remember? She asked. You'd come because your father made you, and you'd pretend you didn't want to dance. I danced with you every time. The music stopped, leaving a heavy silence. Your mother's piano, Evelyn said softly. I couldn't get rid of the last piece of her I had left. You miss her? I still don't understand why this place, why we weren't enough for her. Maybe it had nothing to do with you, Evelyn said, turning to face him. Maybe she was just scared. Scared of what? Of waking up one day and not knowing the woman in the mirror. Of loving something so much it felt like a cage. The words hit him hard. You think she was right to leave? I think desperate people make hard choices, and your father never let himself see that, so he taught you to be afraid of the same thing. But you're not him, Caleb, and I'm not your mother. We can write our own story. What if it ends the same? What if you're exactly what I need and you're just too scared to see it? She was so close now, and every part of him screamed to back away. But he was tired of being afraid. Evelyn, he began, his voice hoarse. A loud crash from outside shattered the moment. Caleb grabbed his rifle and headed into the night. The sound came from the barn. Inside was chaos. Feed bags were torn open. In the corner was a mountain cat, sleek and cornered. It was hurt, blood slick on its flank, which only made it more dangerous. Back away slow, Caleb breathed. The cat's eyes glowed like green fire in the lamplight. It coiled, ready to spring. Caleb raised the rifle. Well, now, sometimes a man's got to face down a hungry animal just to protect his own. Caleb had his rifle up, heart pounding, but he wasn't looking to harm that big cat. The drought was hard on everyone, man and beast alike. He kept his voice steady, telling it, Easy now. Nobody's got to get hurt. Just as the cat was fixing to spring, a sound cut through the barn. It was Evelyn singing a soft, strange tune. The cat froze, its killer instinct replaced by pure confusion. Caleb whispered for her to keep going, and she did, easing her way to the door. That big cat just watched, mesmerized, as they backed out slow and careful. Once they were clear, the cat vanished into the night. Caleb's hands started shaking then. He asked her where in the world she learned a trick like that. She just smiled a little and said, "From a book on frontier survival." "That was a fool risk," Caleb said, his voice rough. Evelyn turned to him in the lamplight, her eyes flashing. "I'm not some fragile thing you need to hide away, Caleb. I came home to Montana to stand with you against everything this valley throws at us." He started to argue, but she cut him off. "You push me away every time I get close. I didn't come back here to watch you fight your demons all alone." A silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. "Then why did you come back?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She looked him square in the eye. "Because some dreams you just can't outrun. And some people you just never let go of." Her words hung in the air, a promise as real as the rain that finally started to fall. It was the first real soaker in 3 long years, washing the dust and the doubt away. Caleb reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. "I never forgot you, Ev. Not for a single day." "Then stop trying to," she whispered back. The storm broke right then, sending them running for the house. They stood dripping in the kitchen, the air electric with what they hadn't said, what they'd almost done. All night, Caleb lay awake, listening to that beautiful sound on the roof, knowing she was just down the hall, hearing the very same thing. A new beginning was falling from the sky. By morning, the world looked brand new. Caleb found his ranch hand, Miguel, in the barn. "Lost about 50 pounds of grain," Miguel said. "That cat was skin and bones." Caleb saw its tracks in the mud, seeing how it favored one paw. It was just another creature trying to get by. "Set some snares to warn us, but let it be," Caleb decided. "It's doing what it has to, same as us." Miguel just nodded. He understood that sometimes letting something live is the strongest move you can make. When he asked about Evelyn, Caleb just grunted that she was resting in the guest room. Miguel's eyes twinkled a bit. "Real neighborly of you, boss." Caleb walked into the house to the sound of piano music. Evelyn was playing a tune that sounded like sunshine after a storm. She turned and gave him a smile that could have melted a glacier. "Did you hear it, Caleb? Real rain." He couldn't help but smile back. "The creek's already running higher." She tried to stand, saying she needed to go help her Uncle Thomas, but winced from her bruised ribs. "You're staying put," Caleb said, his voice firm but gentle. "Doctor's orders. I'll ride over and check on your uncle. It's no trouble at all." She looked at him for a long moment, seeing right past the tough wall he put up. "You're a good man, Caleb Merrick," she said softly. Over a warm breakfast, the easy quiet between them felt like coming home after a long, hard journey. Evelyn, full of life, started talking about building a retention pond between their properties. "That's a whole mess of work," he said. "Then we'd best start now," she replied, her eyes shining with a hope he hadn't seen in years. And right there, listening to the rain and the woman he'd tried so hard to forget, Caleb felt a little of that hope himself. "We could do it, Caleb. Together. We could pool our money and our work." The word "together" echoed in his soul. "It's a big risk. If we dig and find nothing, we're no worse off. But if we find water," she said, her eyes shining, "we'd have a future. A future." The idea felt fragile, like something he didn't deserve to hold. "I'll think about it," he said. And her smile told him that was enough for now. After breakfast, Caleb rode out to the Hart place. The rain had washed the world clean. Thomas Hart was overjoyed, showing him the creek running full for the first time in 3 years. "Look at it, boy," the old man yelled. "Real water." Caleb had to smile. "Evelyn said you were worried about selling off your herd." "Still am, truth be told. One good rain don't end a drought," Thomas said, his smile fading a little. "But it's hope. The first real hope I've felt in a long time." "Have you ever wanted something so bad it scared you to death?" That was Caleb. He'd loved Evelyn for more years than he could count, but he was too afraid to reach for her. Her Uncle Thomas saw it plain as day. Standing by a fence post, he looked at Caleb and said, "Son, you going to keep pretending you are over her? Or are you going to do something about it before life takes that choice away from you?" Those words hit Caleb hard. He knew Thomas was right. Fear had made his own father die a lonely man. This story is about not letting fear rob you of happiness. If you have ever been afraid to chase a dream, then keep listening. Thomas clapped him on the shoulder with a surprising strength. "My Evelyn came back to this valley for a reason, Caleb. And I reckon you are a big part of it." Before Caleb could even think of what to say, thunder rumbled in the distance. A storm was brewing, the kind that turns the sky a nasty green. He raced back to his own ranch, needing to get the livestock safe. His ranch hand, Miguel, hollered over the wind, "You better go check on Miss Evelyn. She is all alone over there." Caleb's heart jumped into his throat. Evelyn was terrified of storms. He found her standing at the window, her face pale as she watched the sky boil. A loud crack of thunder shook the whole house, and she flinched, grabbing his arm without thinking. He remembered why she was so scared. A lightning strike when they were just 9 years old had burned the fear right into her memory. "Come on," Caleb said, taking her hand. He led her to his father's old study, a small room with thick walls and no windows. It was the safest place he knew. In the quiet of that little room, the storm felt miles away. Evelyn's breathing finally slowed. She looked at him and asked the question that hung between them. "Why did you shut me out when I came back?" Caleb couldn't lie to her, not anymore. "Because I was terrified," he admitted. "I watched this ranch-in life break my mother and bury my father. I swore I would never let myself care about something that much. I was afraid that if I let myself hope for you again, losing you would destroy me." Her hand gently cupped his face. "You are not your father, Caleb," she said softly. "He let bitterness poison him, but you are still here, still fighting. You pretend not to care, but I see it. You care about your people, about this land, even about that wildcat you refuse to shoot. And you care about me, even if it scares you to death." Just then a loud crack of thunder made Evelyn jump. Without thinking, Caleb pulled her into his arms, a familiar comfort from their childhood. "I never stopped," he whispered into her hair. "Never stopped caring. Never stopped missing you." He pulled back, his deepest fear slipping out. "But for how long, Evelyn? You have a real future in Boston. How long until you realize this was a mistake?" Evelyn's look was a mix of frustration and deep affection. "Is that what you really think of me? That I would run at the first sign of trouble?" "People always leave," he said, his voice flat. "Not me," she insisted, taking his face in both her hands. "I did not come back for a visit, Caleb. I came back because that perfect life in Boston was empty. It was not real. I came back to find the person I am meant to be." "And who is that?" he asked. "Someone who belongs right here," she said, her voice full of conviction. "Someone who would rather fight for something real than be handed something easy. Someone who loves you. I have always loved you." That confession hit him like a lightning strike. "Evelyn," he started, but she continued, her voice stronger now. "I loved you when we were just kids, long before I knew what love meant. I loved you when I left, and I tried for 8 long years to build a life without you. It was a complete failure. I love you now," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Standing in this broken-down house in this dying valley, none of it matters if we are together. After 8 years, I am finally home." Caleb felt the walls he had built around his heart for so long finally start to crumble. "I cannot promise you an easy life," he said, his voice rough. "This ranch is barely holding on. I could lose everything tomorrow." "I do not want easy," she replied firmly. "I want you." "I am broken, Evelyn," he admitted. "My father taught me to be afraid of this, of wanting something so much it could destroy me." "Then let me help you," she whispered, pressing her body close to his. "Let me show you that love can build things, not break them." In that moment, Caleb Merrick finally let go of his fear. It's been since we were kids, Caleb whispered. Since we raced across pastures and you looked at me like I was somebody. For 8 long years, through silence and loneliness, he had loved her. Through every empty sunrise and every sunset that felt like a failure, he had loved her. He pulled back, looking her square in the eye. I love you now. Standing here in the middle of a storm, scared to death that I'll wake up tomorrow and you'll be gone. Her tears fell as his thumbs brushed them away. Promise me you're staying, he pleaded. Promise this is real. Evelyn's smile broke through her tears, a radiant sun after the rain. I promise, Caleb. I turned down the Boston job 2 weeks ago. I told my aunt I was staying. You're my home, and I'm not leaving you ever again. The kiss was like air after being underwater, like rain after a long drought. It was 8 years of longing poured into a single moment, a promise finally kept. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, 2 lost souls had finally found their way back to each other. They talked for hours as the storm passed, making quiet plans for the future they would now build together. Your father would have hated this, Evelyn said softly, her head on his shoulder. He thought love was a weakness, Caleb replied, his arms tightening around her. But he was wrong about a lot of things. He died bitter and alone, and I'll be damned if I end up the same way. Evelyn asked what had changed his mind. Caleb thought of all the years he had spent just trying to survive. I realized that just surviving is not a life, he said. You came back and reminded me what it felt like to hope for something more. You reminded me how to live. He admitted he was still terrified, but he was more scared of losing her again than of taking a risk on happiness. When they finally came out of the study, the world felt washed clean. Miguel, his foreman, met them on the porch. Storm took down some fence in the north pasture, he said, trying to hide a knowing smile. Everyone's fine, Caleb answered, taking Evelyn's hand right there in front of him. Miguel's eyes dropped to their joined hands, and his smile finally broke free. Well now, that's real good, boss, he said, tipping his hat to Evelyn. Miss Evelyn, mighty glad you're sticking around. This place has been missing something for a long time. After Miguel left, Evelyn raised an eyebrow at Caleb. Subtle, she teased. Darling, everyone in this valley has known how I felt about you since we were 15, he chuckled. The only ones we were fooling were ourselves, but we are done hiding now. He pulled her close and kissed her temple. Done hiding and done running. That night they sat on the porch watching the stars come out. The retention pond, Evelyn said, her head resting on his shoulder. We should start on it tomorrow. Caleb laughed, a real, genuine sound. You're going to be an impossible woman, aren't you? Absolutely, she said with a grin. You're stuck with me. He turned her to face him. Best idea I've had in 8 years. The kiss this time was softer, full of tomorrow's promise. I wrote you another letter, she confessed. I never sent it. I said I was coming home. That even if you wanted nothing to do with me, being in the same valley as you is better than being anywhere else in the world without you. Caleb's heart ached for all the lost time. I would have told you to hurry, he said. I was waiting. Evelyn squeezed his hand. We're here now. That has to be enough. And it was. They had found their way back, and that was all that mattered. The next days were a blur of hard work and happiness. They started digging the pond, with Caleb and Miguel doing the heavy lifting while Evelyn directed the operation. The work was tough, but Caleb felt more alive than he had in years. Evelyn's presence had turned the old ranch house from a quiet, lonely place into a real home. One afternoon, Miguel's shovel hit something solid. We hit clay, he announced with a grin. Good clay, too. Should hold water just fine. Caleb jumped into the pit, looking up at Evelyn, who was watching from the edge, her hair glowing in the sun. He thought about how his luck had finally turned. Later that evening, after a huge dinner, Caleb found Evelyn at the piano. "Play something happy," he requested, sitting beside her. Her hands moved across the keys, and the room filled with a bright, joyful melody he had never heard before. "That's new," he said when she finished. "Wrote it this morning," she said, her smile soft. "I woke up next to you, and the song was just there. It's called Coming Home." His throat tightened with emotion. "It's perfect." Evelyn took his hand, her gaze steady and sure. "We're going to make it, Caleb. Whatever comes, we will face it together." He had spent so many years bracing for the next disaster that it was hard to believe. As if she could read his mind, Evelyn leaned in and kissed him with a fierce passion that chased away all his doubts. "Stop waiting for the other shoe to drop," she whispered against his lips. "Stop expecting everything to go wrong. Just be here with me right now, and let yourself be happy." So he did. He finally let go, and he was happy. He pulled Evelyn close, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. Outside, the storm passed, and the work began. The idea of a retention pond, a long shot he had barely dared to dream of, became their mission. For weeks, Caleb and Miguel dug from sunrise to sunset. Evelyn handled the plans, using research she had brought back from Boston to guide them to the perfect spot. Then, one Tuesday morning, Miguel's shovel hit something solid with a loud clang. He dropped to his knees, frantically clearing away the mud. "Water!" he shouted, his voice echoing with pure joy. "We hit the water table!" Caleb leaped into the hole, landing in the cool, muddy seepage. The water was already starting to pool. He scooped some up and tasted it. It was clean and sweet. "It is good," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is damn good water." Evelyn peered down at him, her face shining with happiness. "How much is there?" "Hard to say for sure," Caleb answered, a real smile spreading across his face. "But I think it will be more than enough." Thomas Hart, their old neighbor, did a little dance. "40 years on this land," he cheered, "and you two finally did it. You worked together, just like folks are supposed to." By the end of the week, the pond was full, sparkling in the sun like a promise fulfilled. They had saved the ranch, and they had done it together. That evening, Caleb and Evelyn stood by the water, watching the sunset. He pulled her close, smelling the familiar scent of lavender in her hair. "Thank you," he said. "You came back and reminded me how to build a future, not just survive the present." She turned in his arms. "You would have found a way." "Maybe," he said, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. "Or maybe I would have ended up just like my father, too stubborn and scared to accept any help. You saved me, Evelyn." "You saved yourself," she corrected him softly. "I just reminded you that you were worth it." The kiss that followed was full of all the words they had left unsaid, and all the promise of the future they would now build together. The past was gone. What lay ahead was not just survival. It was life. After the storm passed, they sat together, looking out over the rain-washed valley. The air was clean and cool. "Do you remember the last time we were up here?" she asked softly. Caleb remembered it perfectly. It was the night before she left for Boston 8 years ago, when they were just 17. "I remember thinking my life was ending," he said. She told him about a dream she had in Boston, where she was always searching for him in the valley but could never find him. "You were always just out of reach," she whispered. Caleb pulled her closer. "I am here now," he said. "You found me." And with the valley spread out before them, the words just came to him. "Marry me, Evelyn." He saw the surprise in her eyes and rushed on. "I know it is fast, but I have loved you for over half my life. I spent 8 years trying to stop, and it did not work. I do not want to waste another minute." Evelyn looked from his face to the ranch below. "Caleb, I cannot promise you an easy life. This place is still hanging on by a thread. He just smiled. I am not asking for easy, Evelyn. I am asking for you. Have you ever felt like you weren't good enough for the person you loved? Caleb felt that way every single day. He looked at Evelyn and saw everything he couldn't offer her. No fancy life, no Boston comforts. He took her trembling hands and laid his heart bare. He promised to be her partner, to stand by her, and to spend his life proving she made the right choice. But Evelyn stopped him. She cupped his face and said he was selling himself short. She didn't want easy. She wanted a life that mattered, with a partner who saw her as an equal. She wanted the stubborn, quiet man who loved with his whole heart. She wanted him. This story is about choosing a hard life filled with love over an easy one that's empty. Stick around to see if their love is strong enough to overcome the challenges ahead. Evelyn laughed through her tears. Yes, you impossible man. I will marry you. I will build and fight right alongside you for the rest of our days. The kiss that followed sealed their promise, filled with 8 long years of waiting and hoping. When they finally broke apart, Evelyn was smiling. We have to tell Uncle Thomas. He is going to be insufferable about being right. Right about what? Caleb asked. He told me from the start that you and I were inevitable, that we just needed to stop being fools. Caleb helped her down from the hayloft, and they walked back to the house hand in hand, their future finally settled. Later in the warm kitchen, Evelyn asked him a simple question. When do you want to get married? Caleb's first thought was tomorrow, before anything could change her mind. But she deserved better than a rushed ceremony. Before winter, he said. That gives us 3 months to plan something simple and right. Evelyn agreed completely. She didn't want a fancy Boston wedding. All she wanted was family, friends, a preacher, and a big party with good food and dancing under the stars. Caleb pulled her into his arms. How did I get so lucky? This was never about luck, she whispered. We just took the long way to get here. Word of their engagement spread like wildfire through the valley. The community was overjoyed. Rosa insisted on baking the cake, and Miguel offered to build the wedding arbor. Even old Thomas Hart declared he was giving the bride away, telling Evelyn she was his only family. Meanwhile, the pond they had built together continued to fill, bringing life back to the land. One evening, sitting by the water, Evelyn said they should name it. Caleb thought for a moment. Let's call it Hope Springs, he said, because that is what it gave us. But their peaceful planning was interrupted. A letter arrived from Evelyn's aunt in Boston. As Evelyn read it, her face grew pale. What is it? Caleb asked. It is my aunt, she said, her voice shaking. She is coming to visit. She wants to meet you and convince me that I am making a terrible mistake. The aunt believed Evelyn was throwing her life away for a romantic fantasy that would end in ruin. She is coming next week, Evelyn said, fear creeping into her eyes. My aunt is a formidable woman who is used to getting her way. Do you have any doubts? Caleb asked her. No, she said fiercely. Not for a second. But she knows how to make me feel like a foolish little girl. Caleb took her hands in his. Then we will face her together. Let her come and see what we have built. The only thing that matters is that you want this life with me. I want this life, she confirmed, her voice steady again. I want you. But as the day of his aunt's arrival got closer, Caleb's old insecurities returned. He saw himself through the eyes of a wealthy Boston lady, just a rough cowboy with a failing ranch. He put on his best shirt, but it couldn't hide who he was. A man with dirt under his fingernails. Standing in the doorway, Evelyn saw him. You look fine, she said, smiling. You look exactly like the man I love. That woman is not taking you from me, Evelyn said, her voice firm. You're the man I love, and the man I've chosen. The train from back east pulled in, and out stepped a woman who looked like she was carved from ice. Tall, dressed in clothes that cost more than a good horse, with eyes that sized you up like cattle at an auction. Evelyn, she said, her voice as chilly as a mountain morning. This must be the man who convinced you to abandon civilization. She barely touched Caleb's outstretched hand. The wagon ride back to the ranch was dead quiet. Caleb could feel her judging his simple house and weathered barn. How quaint, was all she said, and it wasn't a compliment. Later, while he was mucking out stalls, Evelyn found him, her face tight with anger. "She's trying to buy me off," she said. "Aunt Margaret offered to buy out Uncle Thomas, clear all his debts and give the whole ranch to me. There's just one catch. I have to go back to Boston and marry a man I don't love." Caleb felt the handle of the pitchfork creak in his grip. "And what did you tell her?" he asked. "I told her no, of course," Evelyn said, stepping close. "I told her my life is here with you. No amount of money is changing that." "She'll go to your uncle directly," Caleb warned. "He needs that money." Evelyn just shook her head. "Have a little faith. Now let's go show her what a real partnership looks like." Dinner was a battlefield of pleasantries. Aunt Margaret picked at everything, from the food to the house, all while smiling. She praised Caleb's hard work in a way that made it sound like a failing. "Tell me, Mr. Merrick," she said, "have you legally protected my niece's interests in this little venture, or is she just free labor?" Before Evelyn could speak, Caleb answered, "It is a fair question. Evelyn and I will be equal partners in everything. I love your niece. Together we are building a life." "Love," Margaret scoffed, as if the word tasted sour. "Love does not pay the bills, Mr. Merrick." "No, ma'am, it sure does not," Caleb said, meeting her cold stare. "Hard work pays the bills. But love is what makes the work worth doing. It is what turns surviving into living." For the first time, the woman looked uncertain. Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand. "I am marrying this man," she said, her voice full of steel. "This is my home." Margaret simply stood up. "I see. I believe I will retire for the evening." The next morning, Caleb found Margaret waiting for him on the porch. "I have been thinking about your speech on partnership," she began, her voice smooth as silk. "But have you really thought about what you are asking of my niece? In Boston, she could have a life of influence. Here," she said, gesturing to the wide-open valley, "she will just be a rancher's wife, working herself to an early grave. Are you sure this is love, Mr. Merrick, or are you just being selfish? What happens when the romance fades, Caleb? When it is just hard work and even harder winters?" Margaret's words hit his deepest fears. He knew part of him agreed with her. Evelyn deserved more than this. He answered slowly, "I cannot promise her an easy life, but I can promise her a real one, full of purpose and partnership. That has to count for something." Margaret leaned in. "I have seen bright young women marry for love and wake up at 40, regretting the potential they buried under years of compromise." Caleb's voice was quiet. "Like your sister? Evelyn's mother? She left this valley, married a man back east, and was happy. You just never forgave her for it. You are trying to stop Evelyn from making a choice, not a mistake." Margaret stood, her back ramrod straight. "I have seen what hardship does to love, Mr. Merrick. It crushes it." She looked out at the dawn breaking over the valley. "But I see my niece has made her choice. Perhaps I have held on too tight." The admission seemed to pain her. Turning back, her expression softened. "I may not approve of this, but she is a grown woman. Her life is her own." Her voice turned to steel. "However, if you hurt her, if you waste her potential or fail to see the gift you have been given, you will answer to me. Is that clear?" Caleb nodded. "Crystal, ma'am." "Good," she said. "Now I have a letter to write, telling Charles Whitmore that Evelyn will not be coming back to Boston." It was not approval, but it was a start. Even Aunt Margaret, who'd arrived ready to disapprove, had left with a smile, promising to return for the wedding. For a moment, Caleb and Evelyn felt a sense of peace. But peace in Montana is a fickle thing. The calm shattered 2 weeks before their big day, when a cream-colored envelope arrived from the bank. Caleb knew that particular shade of paper. It had been the star of his nightmares for 3 long years. His hands were steady opening it, but his heart was beating a wild rhythm against his ribs. The legal jargon boiled down to one simple, brutal fact. The bank was calling in his loan. He had 30 days to produce $12,000 or face foreclosure. "Caleb?" Evelyn asked from the doorway, her voice sharp with worry. He just handed her the letter. Her face went pale, then her eyes blazed with a righteous fury. "They can't do this. Not now." "They can," Caleb said, staring out at the land that felt like it was slipping through his fingers. "New management. They decided the Merrick Ranch is too big a risk." The amount was a bad joke. $12,000 might as well have been $12 million. "Then we fight," she declared. "Sell the cattle early, whatever it takes." "That won't bring half of it," he replied, the hope already draining from his voice. "So you're just giving up?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I'm being realistic," he said, the words coming out harsher than he meant. He saw her flinch and hated himself for it. "This is not false hope, Caleb," she said quietly, stepping closer. "This is our life. Don't you dare use this as an excuse to push me away and tell yourself you're better off alone." He wanted to argue, but she saw right through him. The old instinct to face failure by himself was already taking over. "I can't drag you down with me," he mumbled. "The land doesn't make you who you are, Caleb," she insisted, her hands gripping his arms. "The man I love is a fighter." Before he could answer, hoofbeats announced the arrival of Miguel, his foreman. One look at their faces told him everything. "Bad news," he stated. "The worst," Caleb confirmed, handing him the letter. Miguel's jaw worked as he read. "Those buzzards. So what are we going to do?" That single word, "we," hit Caleb right in the chest. Miguel had stuck by him through everything. That evening, old Thomas Hart rode over. He listened grimly to the whole story. "How much can you raise?" he asked. "Maybe 5,000, Caleb admitted. "Still 7,000 short." "I've got 2,000 saved up. It's yours," Thomas said, his voice firm. "This ain't just your fight, son. This is this whole valley's fight." And in the days that followed, the valley proved him right. Neighbors showed up with what little they had. $50 from one family, $200 from another. Mrs. Patterson from the general store donated $300. "My husband would want it used to keep this valley alive," she said. Rosa and Miguel insisted on giving their entire life savings of $400. When Caleb tried to refuse, Rosa just stared him down. "This ranch is our home, too. We're family, Caleb, and family fights together." By the end of the week, they had raised a miracle, nearly $9,000. But they were still $3,000 short, an impossible gap. Evelyn found him at the kitchen table long after midnight, the picture of defeat. "Come to bed," she urged gently. "What if there's nothing left to figure out?" he asked, his voice hollow. She knelt in front of him, her eyes locking with his. "Do you love me, Caleb?" The question surprised him. "You know I do." "Then trust us," she pleaded. "I am not going anywhere, ranch or no ranch. I chose you." Her words finally broke through the walls around his heart. "I'm scared," he admitted, the confession raw and painful. "I'm scared of failing everyone. Scared of losing the last piece of my father I have left." "Your father is in every fence post you have fixed and every sunrise you have watched over this land," Evelyn said, her voice gentle but strong. "He is in your strength. But he was wrong about one thing, Caleb. Love is not a weakness. It is what makes the fight worthwhile." He pulled her close, holding on tight. "What would I do without you?" he whispered. "Lucky for you," she smiled. "We will never have to find out." 2 days later, a telegram arrived from Boston. Evelyn let out a whoop of joy that brought Caleb running. "Aunt Margaret," she said, her hands trembling as she held the paper. "She sold some investments. She is wiring $3,000 as an early wedding gift." Caleb stared, unable to believe it. "That is what we need. With that and the valley's help, we can pay off the bank. We can save this ranch." They paid off the loan 3 days early. The look on the new bank manager's face was worth every struggle. That night, the valley showed up at the ranch with food and fiddles for a surprise celebration. A huge bonfire lit up the night as folks danced. Miguel handed Caleb a cup of whiskey. "To the stubborn fool who refused to let this place die," the foreman toasted. "And to the community that saved it," Caleb replied. "I could not have done it alone." "No," Miguel agreed. "But the old you would have tried to. You would have gone down fighting by yourself. The fact that you let people help you, that is growth, boss. That is what she has given you." Caleb watched Evelyn laugh, her face glowing in the firelight. "She has given me everything." Caleb pulled Evelyn into his arms as a slow song began. "Happy?" she asked, resting her head on his chest. "Terrified," he admitted, "and grateful. I still cannot believe we pulled it off." "Believe it," she said. "We saved both ranches. Uncle Thomas can finally make improvements now that the debt is gone." "Speaking of both ranches," Caleb began, "I have been thinking. After we are married, what if we merged them? Make one large operation that we run together?" Evelyn's eyes shone. "Are you serious?" "It makes sense," he said. "Together, we could build something to last for generations." She tested the words. "The Merrick Hart Ranch." "How about Hope Springs Ranch?" Caleb suggested. "After the pond that brought us back together. A new name for a new beginning." Evelyn's smile was brilliant. "Hope Springs Ranch. It is perfect." The wedding took place on a ridge overlooking the single united property they now shared. The entire valley was there to watch. Caleb stood under an arbor of cottonwood branches, his heart pounding as he watched Evelyn walk toward him on her uncle's arm. The setting sun lit her from behind, and he could barely breathe. This was real. After 8 long years, this was finally happening. The preacher's words were traditional, but Caleb meant them with every piece of his soul. Evelyn's vows were just as sure, her eyes locked on his. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed her like she was a miracle. The valley erupted in cheers, celebrating a victory that belonged to them all. Under the stars, a guitar played as neighbors danced and celebrated their good fortune. Later, Caleb and Evelyn slipped away to the ridge where they were married, the valley peaceful in the moonlight below. "No regrets?" he asked, pulling her close against the chill. "Not a single one," she whispered. "Only that we lost 8 years." He kissed her temple. "I am trying to focus on what we have now, not what we lost." "Good," Evelyn said, turning in his arms. "Because we have this ranch, good neighbors, and each other. We can face anything as long as we face it together." They walked away from the embers, back to a home that was finally and truly theirs. In the months that followed, they worked as one. Her book smarts and his country sense turned Hope Springs into a thriving ranch, profitable for the first time in 10 years. When Evelyn told him she was pregnant, a deep and honest fear took hold of Caleb. "I cannot lose you," he would say, his hand on her belly. "Not now." She would just smile and cover his hand with hers. "You are not going to lose me, Caleb. We are all going to be fine." And she was right. Their daughter, Sarah, was born healthy, with his dark hair and her summer blue eyes. Holding her for the first time changed something deep inside Caleb. He promised his little girl that she would always, always know she was loved. The family grew with a son, Daniel, and another daughter, Lily. The ranch thrived right along with them, and soon folks from all over were coming to see the new ways they had pioneered. Years later, Caleb stood on that same wedding ridge, looking out over the valley. Miguel, now gray at the temples but still strong, found him there. "My father was wrong about so much," Caleb said quietly. "About love, and about what makes a life worth living. I came so close to repeating his mistakes." "But you did not," Miguel said gently. "You chose to build something better." Caleb watched his children playing by the pond and knew the land was not the legacy. The life they built on it was. He started down the hill, and little Sarah ran to meet him, her face bright with joy. "Daddy, Mama made your favorite pie." Caleb swept her up into a big hug. As he reached the house, Evelyn gave him a mysterious smile. I just wanted to remind you how far we have come, she said. From that day you tried so hard not to care about the girl getting off the stagecoach. He pulled her close. I failed at that, did I not? She laughed and took his arm. Thank God for failure. Looking at the life they had built, he knew the fearful boy he once was had disappeared. I have loved you since we were children, Evelyn, he said, the words coming as easy as breathing. You saved me from a life that was not worth living. We saved each other, she corrected softly. That is what partners do. As they all sat down for dinner, their laughter filling the once empty house, Caleb knew this was what it meant to truly live, and in the end, that made all the difference. Years later, their grandchildren would hear the story of how Hope Springs Ranch was saved. They learned that real strength comes from being vulnerable and that love takes real courage. The ranch became a landmark, a testament to their partnership, and some folks still say that on quiet summer nights, you can hear piano music drifting from that old house on the ridge, a reminder that some love stories never truly end. Caleb Merrick learned his greatest lesson from a girl with summer blue eyes who came home to the valley where she belonged. He learned that the very life he had been too afraid to even want was waiting for him the whole time. All he had to do was find the courage to reach out and take it. And so he did. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.